3 years after a girl vanished in Central Park, we found something in the lake that still haunts me. I'm a park maintenance worker, and what we pulled from that water changed everything we thought we knew about her disappearance. This is the true story of Sarah Chen, the 16-year-old who disappeared on a sunny October afternoon in 1994. What we discovered in Turtle Pond 3 years later defied every theory the police had. I was there when we found it, and I'm about to tell you exactly what happened. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, because this story involves evidence that was never made public. You won't hear this anywhere else. I still remember the exact moment our maintenance crew changed from routine lake cleaning to something that would haunt us forever. It was October 15th, 1997, exactly 3 years and 2 days after Sarah Chen disappeared in Central Park. I'd been working these grounds for 12 years, cleaning paths, trimming bushes, maintaining the delicate balance between nature and the millions of visitors who walked through our gates annually. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what we found that autumn morning when the water level in Turtle Pond dropped unexpectedly. The morning started like hundreds before it. I arrived at 6 a.m. when the park belonged to joggers and dog walkers, before the tourist buses disgorged their passengers and the city truly awakened. My partner that day was Tommy Rodriguez, a kid barely 22 who'd been on the crew for 8 months. He was eager, maybe too eager, always volunteering for the messy jobs nobody else wanted. We'd been assigned pond maintenance, a routine task we'd performed dozens of times. Drain the water, clean the bottom, check the filtration system, refill. Simple, mechanical, safe. But that morning felt different from the moment I stepped out of the maintenance truck. The air carried an unusual stillness, as if the park itself was holding its breath. The usual symphony of bird calls seemed muted. Even the squirrels moved with less urgency than normal. I remember thinking it was probably just the change in barometric pressure, a storm system approaching from the west. Weather affects everything in the park, from visitor patterns to animal behavior. After 12 years, you learn to read these subtle signs. Tommy chatted nervously as we set up the pumping equipment. He'd heard the stories about Sarah Chen, like everyone who worked the park. Her disappearance had become part of our informal orientation, a cautionary tale about staying alert, about the fact that bad things could happen even in this carefully maintained green oasis in the middle of Manhattan. But for Tommy, it was ancient history. He'd been in high school when she vanished. For him, it was just another urban legend, like the rumors about forgotten tunnels beneath the park, or sightings of exotic animals released by eccentric millionaires. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've kept this story locked inside me for decades. The official reports buried most of the details, and the media moved on to other tragedies. But Sarah's case never left me. How could it? I was part of the search teams that combed every inch of the park for weeks. I watched her parents age 10 years in 10 days. I saw the hope drain from Detective Rivera's eyes as leads went cold. And I was there when we found something that turned everything upside down. The thing about working in Central Park is that you become invisible to most people. Visitors see the manicured lawns, the pristine pathways, the perfectly trimmed hedges, but they don't see us, the army of workers who arrive before dawn and leave after dusk to maintain this illusion of natural perfection. We're ghosts in green uniforms, moving through the landscape like shadows, but this invisibility gives us a unique perspective. We see things others miss. We notice patterns, changes, anomalies. We know when something doesn't belong. I'd noticed Sarah Chen weeks before she disappeared, not because she was unusual, but because she was so wonderfully normal. A teenage girl with an expensive camera, moving through the park with the focused intensity of someone discovering the world frame by frame. She had a routine, always entering at East 72nd Street, always following roughly the same path, always stopping at the same spots where the light hit the trees just right. She was polite to the maintenance staff, which was rare among teenagers. Once, she'd even asked my permission before photographing me raking leaves. worried she might be invading my privacy. The Chen family had that particular quality of recent New Yorkers, still amazed by the city's energy, still noticing details that long-time residents took for granted. Dr. Chen would jog through the park most mornings, always nodding to the groundskeepers, always careful to stay on designated paths. Linda Chen brought sketchpads and would spend hours at Bethesda Fountain, drawing tourists and street performers with the patient eye of a trained artist. They seemed like the perfect family, the kind that made you believe the American dream was still attainable. The Chen family had moved to Manhattan from San Francisco just 6 months before Sarah vanished. Dr. James Chen was a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai, and his wife Linda taught art at a private school on the Upper East Side. Sarah was their only child, a bright 16-year-old with dreams of studying photography at NYU. She carried her camera everywhere, documenting the city through fresh eyes. Her Instagram, still primitive by today's standards, showed a girl falling in love with New York's endless stories. That October day in 1994 started like any other. Sarah left her family's apartment on East 79th Street around 2 p.m., telling her mother she wanted to photograph the autumn leaves in the park. She'd done this dozens of times before, always returning by dinner. Linda Chen had grown comfortable with these solo adventures. Central Park felt safe in the mid-90s, especially during daylight hours with plenty of foot traffic. Sarah was responsible, street-smart, and had her father's pager number memorized. What I learned later during the investigation was that Sarah had been working on a photography project for her school's art magazine. She was documenting what she called urban nature, the way wildlife adapted to city life, the contrast between manicured gardens and wild spaces, the intersection of human activity and natural cycles. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, described it as sophisticated work for a 16-year-old, showing real artistic vision and technical skill. The morning of her disappearance, Sarah had been excited about the light. Linda Chen remembered her daughter checking the weather forecast obsessively, timing her departure to coincide with what photographers call the golden hour, that magical time when sunlight takes on a warm, honey-colored quality that makes everything look like a movie scene. Sarah had packed extra film, charged her camera batteries, even brought a small reflector to manipulate shadows. She was planning what she thought would be the culminating session of her project. The temperature that day reached an unseasonable 78 degrees. Families spread blankets on the great lawn. Joggers shed their jackets. Street musicians played longer sets, drawing bigger crowds. By all accounts, it was a perfect autumn day in the city. Sarah's camera captured the golden light, filtering through maple trees, children feeding ducks at the pond, elderly couples sharing benches. Her last photos, recovered from her camera 3 days later, showed timestamps ending at 4:47 p.m. near Bow Bridge. But here's what the police reports didn't mention. What only came out during the intensive investigation that followed. Sarah's photos from that day showed more than just pretty autumn scenes. Mixed in with the artistic shots were several images that seemed almost documentary in nature. A man in a dark coat who appeared in multiple frames, always in the background, always facing away from the camera. A van parked in a restricted area near the Shakespeare Garden. A maintenance worker whose uniform didn't match the standard Park Service outfit. These details were subtle, probably unintentional on Sarah's part, but they suggested she might have unconsciously documented something suspicious. Security cameras from 1994 were primitive compared to today's surveillance network. The park had maybe 20 functioning cameras, mostly near entrances and high-traffic areas. Sarah appeared on exactly 3 cameras that day. The first showed her entering at East 72nd Street at 2:18 p.m. The second captured her walking toward Bethesda Fountain at 3:45 p.m. The third and final sighting placed her near the Shakespeare Garden at 4:52 p.m., just 5 minutes after her last photograph. The camera footage, grainy and black and white, became the foundation of the investigation. Detective Rivera spent hours analyzing each frame, looking for anyone who might have been following Sarah, any interaction that seemed out of place. The first camera showed Sarah as she typically appeared, confident, purposeful, camera bag slung over her shoulder. She paused to check her equipment, adjusted her lens settings, then headed into the park with the familiar stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The second camera, positioned near Bethesda Fountain, captured something more interesting. Sarah appeared to be talking to someone just outside the camera's range. Her body language suggested a casual conversation. She was smiling, gesturing with her hands, completely at ease. But whoever she was talking to remained invisible to the surveillance system. This 30-second interaction became the focus of intense scrutiny. Was this Sarah's last known human contact? Was this person responsible for her disappearance? The third camera provided the most haunting footage. Sarah walked past alone, but something had changed. Her movement seemed more hurried, less confident. She kept looking over her shoulder, checking her watch. For the first time that day, she appeared nervous, maybe even frightened. The timestamp showed 4:52 p.m. 5 minutes later, according to her camera's internal clock, she took her final photograph. Then she vanished from the historical record. When Sarah didn't return by 7 p.m., Linda Chen began making phone calls. She tried Sarah's friends first, thinking maybe her daughter had gotten caught up in some teenage social drama and forgotten to check in, but none of Sarah's classmates had seen her. By 8 p.m., Dr. Chen was driving through the park, calling Sarah's name from his car window. By 9 p.m., they'd contacted park security. By 10 p.m., the NYPD was officially involved. The first responders treated it as a routine missing person case. Teenage runaways weren't uncommon, especially in a city where family pressures and academic expectations could push kids to their breaking points. But Dr. and Mrs. Chen insisted this was completely out of character for Sarah. She'd never stayed out without permission, never given them reason to worry about her judgment or decision-making. The responding officers were polite but not particularly concerned. They took a description, noted Sarah's last known location, and promised to file a report. Everything changed when they found the camera. A jogger discovered it the next morning, partially hidden in bushes near the Delacorte Theatre, about a quarter-mile from where the security cameras had last captured Sarah. The camera was undamaged, its memory card intact, but the discovery location made no sense. If Sarah had simply dropped it, why was it hidden? If someone had stolen it, why hadn't they taken the expensive equipment? And if Sarah had deliberately hidden it, why there? And why would she leave behind her most prized possession? The investigation consumed NYPD's resources for months. Detective Maria Rivera, a 20-year veteran with an impeccable closure rate, personally oversaw every aspect of the case. She interviewed Sarah's classmates, analyzed her computer, traced her phone records. Nothing suggested she was unhappy at home or planning to run away. Her bank account remained untouched. Her passport stayed in her bedroom drawer. Sarah had simply evaporated from existence during those final 5 minutes between camera sightings. Detective Rivera was a legend in the department, known for her methodical approach and her ability to see patterns others missed. She'd solved cases that had stumped her colleagues for years, earned commendations from the mayor, and never met a puzzle she couldn't eventually crack. But Sarah Chen's disappearance challenged everything she thought she knew about investigative work. There were no logical explanations, no clear motives, no evidence trail to follow. The detective's first theory focused on the mysterious conversation captured by the second security camera. She assembled a team of officers to canvass the area around Bethesda Fountain, interviewing anyone who'd been in the park that day. They spoke to street performers, tourists, vendors, joggers, dog walkers, anyone who might have witnessed Sarah's interaction with the unknown person. But despite hundreds of interviews, no one remembered seeing Sarah talking to anyone near the fountain. Rivera's second theory involved the suspicious elements in Sarah's photographs. She had the images enhanced by the police department's crime lab, trying to identify the man in the dark coat, the unauthorized van, the oddly dressed maintenance worker. The man's face was never visible, always turned away or obscured by shadows. The van's license plate was partially blocked by tree branches. The maintenance worker was too far away and too blurry to identify. Every potential lead dissolved under closer scrutiny. The detective then focused on Sarah's personal life, looking for hidden stresses or secret relationships that might explain her disappearance. She interviewed Sarah's teachers, who described a dedicated student with a bright future. She spoke to Sarah's friends, who revealed typical teenage concerns about college applications and social dynamics, but nothing that suggested serious problems. She analyzed Sarah's journal, finding entries about photography techniques, movie reviews, and crushes on classmates, the normal thoughts of a normal teenager. Rivera even investigated the Chen family themselves, following standard protocol for missing person cases. She examined their finances, looking for signs of hidden debts or criminal connections. She interviewed their neighbors, colleagues, and friends, searching for any indication of family dysfunction or domestic violence. She scrutinized Dr. Chen's medical practice and Linda Chen's teaching career, hunting for disgruntled patients or students who might want to hurt the family. Every avenue led nowhere. The search efforts were unprecedented in scope. The NYPD brought in cadaver dogs to search every inch of the park. They dragged all the water features, from the large reservoir to the smallest decorative ponds. They examined storm drains, maintenance tunnels, and abandoned structures. They coordinated with transit police to check subway tunnels that ran beneath the park. Volunteers organized by the Chen family expanded the search beyond park boundaries, covering surrounding neighborhoods, abandoned buildings, and construction sites. As days turned to weeks, the theories became more desperate. Had Sarah suffered some kind of medical emergency that caused amnesia? Rivera checked every hospital in the tri-state area, looking for unidentified patients matching Sarah's description. Had she been kidnapped and taken out of the city? The FBI joined the investigation, examining similar cases across the country, looking for patterns or connected crimes. Had she somehow left the park through an exit not covered by cameras? They mapped every possible route, accounting for blind spots and camera malfunctions. One particularly disturbing theory emerged from the behavioral analysts, that Sarah had unknowingly photographed something or someone involved in criminal activity and had been eliminated to prevent her from becoming a witness. This would explain the nervous behavior captured on the final security camera and the careful hiding of her camera equipment. But without knowing what Sarah might have seen, this theory was impossible to prove or disprove. Theories emerged and dissolved like morning mist. Had she fallen into one of the park's water features? Divers searched every pond, lake, and fountain. Had someone grabbed her during those crucial minutes? But hundreds of people were in the area, and no one saw anything suspicious. Had she somehow left the park undetected? Security footage from surrounding streets showed no trace of her. The case defied logic, physics, and every investigative technique Detective Rivera knew. The psychological toll on everyone involved was immense. Dr. Chen took a leave of absence from his surgical practice, spending his days walking through the park, showing Sarah's photograph to anyone who would look. Linda Chen stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped functioning as anything other than a mother searching for her missing child. They hired 3 different private investigation firms, spent their life savings on reward money, and consulted psychics, mediums, and anyone else who claimed they could help find Sarah. The media attention was relentless initially. Sarah's photograph appeared on every local news broadcast. Her parents held tearful press conferences. Volunteers searched the park daily for weeks. But as autumn turned to winter and winter melted into spring, the spotlight moved elsewhere. The Chen family hired private investigators, posted rewards, never stopped believing Sarah was alive somewhere. But the official investigation gradually wound down as newer cases demanded attention. I watched this unfold from my unique perspective as park maintenance staff. We were questioned extensively in the early days. Had we seen anything unusual? Did we know Sarah? Had we noticed any suspicious individuals or activities? The investigators were thorough but respectful, understanding that we might have information others didn't. We cooperated fully, but like everyone else, we had nothing useful to offer. The case created an atmosphere of unease that lingered long after the news vans left. Parents became more protective of their children. Joggers avoided running alone near the areas where Sarah was last seen. Even seasoned park workers like myself found ourselves looking over our shoulders more often, paying attention to shadows and sounds that had never bothered us before. Sarah's disappearance had shattered the park's sense of safety and predictability. By the summer of 1995, the official investigation had essentially stalled. Detective Rivera still worked the case, but with reduced resources and mounting pressure to focus on newer crimes. The Chen family's private investigators continued their efforts, but they were chasing the same cold leads that had frustrated the police. Sarah's face appeared on missing person flyers that gradually faded and tore, replaced by newer tragedies and more recent disappearances. The first anniversary of Sarah's disappearance brought renewed media attention, but it felt hollow, perfunctory. The news stories recycled the same facts, interviewed the same sources, and reached the same non-conclusions. Detective Rivera held a press conference asking for new information, but no significant tips emerged. The Chen family organized a memorial service in the park, attended by dozens of people who had never known Sarah but felt compelled to show support for her parents' ongoing anguish. By 1997, Sarah Chen had become another cold case file in Detective Rivera's cabinet. The park returned to normal operations. Tourists asked fewer questions about the missing girl. Life moved forward, as it always does, but those of us who worked the grounds never forgot. We found ourselves unconsciously searching faces in crowds, hoping to spot Sarah's distinctive features. We paid extra attention to isolated areas during our rounds. She had become part of the park's DNA, a ghost story whispered among staff. The Chen family's marriage couldn't survive the stress of their loss. Dr. Chen threw himself into his work, performing surgeries with robotic precision while his personal life crumbled. Linda Chen became obsessed with maintaining Sarah's bedroom exactly as she'd left it, turning their apartment into a shrine that Dr. Chen found unbearable. They separated in early 1996, divorced by the end of the year, and communicated only through lawyers about the ongoing search efforts. Detective Rivera never officially closed the case, but she transferred to a different precinct in 1996, unable to continue working in an environment where Sarah's unsolved disappearance served as a daily reminder of her professional failure. Her replacement, Detective Jim Walsh, was competent but lacked Rivera's passionate investment in finding Sarah. The case file grew dust on his desk, occasionally reviewed when similar disappearances occurred elsewhere, but never generating new leads or fresh perspectives. That's why October 15th, 1997, hit us so hard. We were draining Turtle Pond for annual maintenance when the water level dropped enough to reveal something metallic glinting in the mud. At first, we thought it was trash. Maybe a bicycle or shopping cart dumped by vandals. But as more water pumped out, the shape became unmistakably human. What we found changed everything we thought we knew about Sarah's disappearance and raised questions that still keep me awake at night. The object wasn't Sarah. It was something far more disturbing. Wrapped in plastic and weighted down with rocks, we discovered what appeared to be Sarah's clothes, the exact outfit she wore the day she vanished. But here's what made our blood run cold. The clothes were perfectly preserved, as if they'd been carefully cleaned and folded before being submerged. Inside the jacket pocket, we found a handwritten note that read simply, "She asked too many questions." The handwriting analysis took weeks, but it matched no one in the system. Tommy Rodriguez was the first to spot it. He'd been working the pond's bottom with a rake, clearing debris and sediment, when his tool caught on something that didn't feel like the usual assortment of bottles, cans, and lost toys. "Marcus," he called out, his voice tight with confusion. "This don't feel right." I waded over to where he was standing, and together we carefully extracted what looked like a bundle wrapped in heavy-duty plastic sheeting. The package was about the size of a small suitcase, bound with rope and weighted down with landscaping stones, the kind we used throughout the park for decorative borders. Someone had taken considerable care to ensure it stayed submerged. The plastic showed no signs of deterioration, despite 3 years underwater, suggesting it had been sealed professionally. As we lifted it from the mud, water poured from small punctures that had been deliberately made to allow the bundle to sink. We should have called the police immediately. Protocol demanded it. But human curiosity is a powerful force, and after 3 years of wondering what happened to Sarah Chen, we found ourselves staring at what might be our first real clue. Tommy had his utility knife out before I could stop him. "We gotta know," he said, and I didn't argue. We carefully cut the plastic open, revealing contents that made us both step backward in shock. Sarah's clothes were arranged as if she'd undressed for bed and folded everything neatly. Her jeans, her favorite NYU sweatshirt, her sneakers, even her undergarments. All clean, all carefully positioned. But it was more than just clothes. Her jewelry was there too. The silver bracelet her parents had given her for her birthday, her grandmother's ring, the small cross necklace she wore daily. These weren't items someone would remove by force. These were clothes someone had taken off voluntarily, or at least willingly, but the note changed everything. It was written on expensive stationery, the kind you'd find in an upscale shop rather than a corner store. The handwriting was precise, almost calligraphic, suggesting education and deliberation. She asked too many questions. 7 words that transformed Sarah's disappearance from a potential accident or random crime into something calculated and personal. Someone had killed Sarah Chen because of something she'd discovered, something she'd inquired about, something she'd photographed. We called Detective Walsh immediately, but it was Detective Rivera who showed up at the scene within 2 hours. She'd heard about the discovery through police channels and couldn't stay away from the case that had defined and nearly destroyed her career. Standing at the pond's edge, staring at the evidence bags containing Sarah's belongings, I watched her face cycle through emotions I couldn't name. Relief that there was finally evidence. Horror at what that evidence implied. Determination to solve a case that had haunted her for 3 years. The crime scene team arrived like an invasion force. They cordoned off the entire pond area, brought in underwater cameras, metal detectors, and forensic divers. They drained the pond completely, sifting through decades of accumulated sediment, looking for additional evidence. They found nothing else related to Sarah, but the thorough search revealed just how carefully her clothes had been placed. The location was deliberately chosen, deep enough to stay hidden, but accessible enough for someone to reach without specialized equipment. The note became the focus of intensive analysis. FBI handwriting experts compared it to thousands of samples from the original investigation, looking for matches among people who'd been questioned 3 years earlier. Linguists analyzed the phrasing, looking for clues about the writer's education, regional background, or native language. Psychologists studied the word choice, trying to build a profile of someone who would take such care to preserve and hide evidence while leaving a cryptic message. The paper itself told a story. It was high-quality stationery, 25% cotton content, watermarked with the logo of a boutique paper company that had only 3 retail locations in Manhattan. The ink was from an expensive fountain pen, the kind favored by lawyers, doctors, or academics. These details suggested someone with money, education, and sophisticated tastes, not the profile investigators had been expecting. The plastic wrapping provided additional clues. It was specialized laboratory-grade material designed to protect sensitive equipment during transport. This wasn't something you could buy at any hardware store. The supplier had only a dozen customers in the New York area, mostly medical facilities and research institutions. Each customer was investigated thoroughly, but none had any connection to Sarah Chen or any record of suspicious activity. The reopened investigation consumed resources at an unprecedented level. Detective Rivera was officially reassigned to the case, leading a task force of 12 investigators. They re-interviewed everyone from the original investigation, looking for new details or inconsistencies in their stories. They expanded the search to include anyone who'd had access to the specialized materials used to wrap Sarah's clothes. They brought in new technologies that hadn't been available in 1994, including enhanced DNA testing and digital image analysis. The psychological impact on the Chen family was devastating. For 3 years, they'd lived with the hope that Sarah might still be alive, that she might return or be found. The discovery of her clothes, combined with the ominous note, destroyed that hope while providing no closure. Dr. Chen, who'd remarried and was trying to rebuild his life, suffered a complete nervous breakdown. Linda Chen, who'd never stopped believing Sarah would come home, became convinced that whoever had killed her daughter was still watching, still waiting, still dangerous. The media attention was even more intense than during the original investigation. The mysterious note, the careful preservation of evidence, the 3-year delay between disappearance and discovery, it all had the elements of a thriller novel. Television shows profiled the case. Newspaper columnists offered theories. Amateur detectives combed through every detail, proposing explanations that ranged from plausible to absurd. But despite the renewed attention and resources, the investigation stalled again. The note's author remained anonymous. The sophisticated wrapping materials led to dead ends. Sarah's clothes provided no new physical evidence. The case had evolved from a missing person investigation to a murder case, but without a body, without witnesses, and without a clear motive, prosecutors had nothing to work with. What really haunts me isn't just what we found that day, but what we didn't find. 3 years is a long time to hold on to evidence before disposing of it. Why wait? Why that specific location? And why leave a note that raised more questions than it answered? Sometimes, late at night when I'm closing the park, I wonder if the person who wrote that note is still watching, still waiting, still keeping secrets that died with Sarah Chen. The most disturbing possibility is that Sarah's murder wasn't random, wasn't the result of a chance encounter with a predator. The note suggests she discovered something, asked questions about something that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. But what could a 16-year-old photography student have stumbled across that was worth killing for? What questions could she have asked that were so dangerous? I've spent countless hours studying her final photographs, looking for clues the police might have missed. The man in the dark coat appears in 7 different shots, always in the background, always positioned where he could observe Sarah without being noticed. The unauthorized van was parked in the same location for at least 90 minutes, according to the photo timestamps. The oddly dressed maintenance worker was carrying equipment that didn't match standard park service tools. Were these details connected to Sarah's death? Was she killed because she'd accidentally documented something criminal? Or was the killer someone who'd been watching her for weeks, studying her patterns, waiting for the perfect opportunity? The note suggests premeditation, careful planning, and a motive beyond simple violence. Someone wanted Sarah Chen dead for a specific reason, and that someone was patient enough to wait 3 years before disposing of the evidence. The case remains open today, 27 years later. Detective Rivera retired but never stopped working it privately. The Chen family moved back to San Francisco, carrying questions that will never have answers. And every time I walk past Turtle Pond during my rounds, I remember that autumn morning when we thought we'd found closure, but instead discovered that some mysteries only deepen with time. In the years since the discovery, I've learned things about the case that were never made public. Detective Rivera and I stayed in touch after her retirement, and she shared details that the media never reported. The handwriting analysis revealed something troubling. The person who wrote the note was likely left-handed, highly educated, and probably suffered from a slight tremor, possibly due to age or medical condition. This profile didn't match any of the suspects from the original investigation. More disturbing was the revelation about the timing. The plastic wrapping showed signs of having been underwater for exactly 2 years, not 3. This meant someone had kept Sarah's clothes for an entire year after her disappearance before placing them in the pond. What had they been doing with the clothes during that time? Why hold on to such incriminating evidence? The implications made everyone involved in the investigation deeply uncomfortable. There were other details that haunted the investigators. The clothes had been cleaned with industrial-grade solvents, the kind used in medical facilities or research laboratories. DNA testing revealed no trace of Sarah's biological material. No hair, skin cells, or other evidence that she'd ever worn these items. It was as if someone had scientifically erased every trace of Sarah from her own belongings before carefully preserving them. The notepaper revealed additional mysteries under forensic analysis. Hidden beneath the visible writing, spectral imaging revealed traces of other words that had been written and erased. The laboratory could only recover fragments: watching, project, and what appeared to be Phase 1. These partial words suggested the note was part of a larger communication or plan, but without more context, they raised more questions than answers. Perhaps most unsettling was the discovery, made years later, that Turtle Pond had been drained for maintenance exactly once in the 5 years preceding our discovery. That maintenance had been performed in September 1996, almost 2 years after Sarah's disappearance and 1 year before we found her clothes. The work crew from 1996 had found nothing unusual. This meant the clothes had been placed in the pond sometime between September 1996 and October 1997, a much narrower window than investigators had initially believed. I've also learned about other disappearances that might be connected. In 1993, a year before Sarah vanished, a 22-year-old art student named Jennifer Morrison disappeared from Washington Square Park. Like Sarah, she was a photographer, documenting urban life for a college project. Like Sarah, she vanished during daylight hours in a crowded public space. Like Sarah, her camera equipment was found later, carefully hidden where it would eventually be discovered. Jennifer's case was never officially linked to Sarah's, but the similarities were too numerous to ignore. In 1998, a year after we found Sarah's clothes, another young photographer disappeared. Maria Santos, 19 years old, was working on a documentary about immigrant communities in Queens when she vanished from Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Her camera was found 3 days later, hidden in a maintenance shed with the memory card intact. Her final photographs showed the same suspicious elements that had appeared in Sarah's work: background figures who seemed to be following her, vehicles parked in restricted areas, individuals whose behavior didn't match their apparent roles. Detective Rivera investigated these connections privately, believing they represented a pattern that official investigators had missed. Her theory was that someone was systematically targeting young photographers, possibly because they were documenting activities that someone wanted to keep hidden. But without official support or resources, she couldn't prove these cases were related. The impact on Central Park itself was profound and lasting. Security protocols were completely overhauled after Sarah's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her clothes. Camera coverage was expanded, lighting was improved, and staff training was enhanced. But more than that, the park's psychological atmosphere changed permanently. The sense of urban sanctuary, of safety within chaos, had been shattered. I noticed the change in visitor behavior over the years. Parents became more protective, keeping their children closer. Photographers, especially young women, rarely worked alone anymore. The areas where Sarah was last seen became subtly avoided, as if people could sense the lingering trauma. Even today, nearly 3 decades later, those spaces feel different, colder, more watchful, tinged with unresolved grief. The maintenance staff developed our own informal protocols. We paid extra attention to isolated areas, reported suspicious individuals more quickly, and never worked alone in sections of the park where sightlines were limited. We became part of an unofficial early warning system, hyper-vigilant for anything that seemed out of place. Some might call it paranoia, but we'd learned that Central Park wasn't immune to evil. Tommy Rodriguez left the maintenance crew 6 months after we found Sarah's clothes. He couldn't handle the nightmares, he said, couldn't stop thinking about what we might find next time we drained a pond or cleaned a storage area. He moved to Phoenix, got a job with the city's parks department there, and never looked back. I don't blame him. Some discoveries change you in ways you can't undo. I've thought a lot about that note over the years. She asked too many questions. Mo, what questions? Questions about what she'd photographed, questions about people she'd observed, questions about activities she'd witnessed. The phrasing suggests Sarah was actively investigating something, not just accidentally stumbling across it. This wasn't a chance encounter with a predator. This was a deliberate silencing of someone who'd gotten too close to a dangerous truth. Sometimes I wonder if the killer is still out there. Still active, still targeting people who ask the wrong questions or see too much. The careful planning evident in Sarah's case suggests someone with resources, patience, and experience. This wasn't a first crime. It was too sophisticated, too well executed, and if it wasn't a first crime, it probably wasn't the last. The most chilling possibility is that Sarah's killer has been successful in avoiding detection for nearly 3 decades. The note wasn't just a confession, it was a warning, a message to anyone else who might be tempted to ask questions or investigate activities they weren't supposed to see. In that sense, Sarah's murder wasn't just about silencing her, it was about creating a climate of fear that would prevent others from following her example. I still work in Central Park, though I'm approaching retirement age now. I still walk past Turtle Pond daily, still remember that October morning when we thought we were just doing routine maintenance. I've seen thousands of visitors since then, watched countless young photographers working on their own projects, and I always wonder, are they safe? Is someone watching them the way someone watched Sarah? And if they ask too many questions, will they simply vanish like she did? The case file remains open, though it's buried under decades of other investigations now. New detectives have inherited it, but without fresh leads or evidence, there's little they can do. Sarah Chen has become a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in America's most carefully maintained public spaces, some secrets are worth killing for. What do you think really happened to Sarah Chen? Was the note a confession, a taunt, or something else entirely? Leave your theories in the comments below.